You're listening to Power BI and More with Ulrik Carlson. This episode of Power BI and More is brought to you by CRM. The Dynamics 365 user group is the world's most influential user group community of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM users and partners. Across the globe, members share a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM so that the individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. We thank CRM for sponsoring Power BI and More from CRM Audio. So, Ulrik, what is this I hear about the Chart Guy World Tour? What is that? How do we go see that?
So, World Tour, at least it's at least two continents, right? So I guess it kind of qualifies as a World Tour. Yeah, so actually I'm excited. I've been invited to speak at some of the Dynamics Saturdays coming up, and actually starting here on the 5th in Sydney, Australia. So I'm going to catch a long flight this week and get to Sydney. And then the following week, I'm participating in the Dynamics Saturday in Melbourne. So that's going to be fun. And then I'm headed back here to stateside, and I'll actually be participating in Dynamics Saturday in Atlanta on June 9th. And finally, I'm really hoping that I can get a Dynamics Saturday off the ground here in San Francisco too, because I feel like we need one in this area. So hopefully I can get one going too. We don't have a date for it yet, but it's getting closer.
Yeah, that would seem like a good place to have one for sure. So what are you going to be performing at the CRM Saturday? Your greatest hits?
Right, so pretty much. So we're doing two things. Actually, the day prior on the Friday, we have a short boot camp, which is basically a getting started with Dynamics customer engagement and Power BI. So basically, getting some data into Power BI and started working with it, and give people enough tools so they can start creating their own reports and KPIs once they get home. So kind of getting over that initial hurdle of getting started with Power BI. Then on the following day at the actual conference, I guess you can call that kind of a greatest hits. That's where we'll be talking about best practices for querying the data. So something that we've talked about here in this podcast, using the OData, or the Flex XML, or the data export service, and kind of just give some up-to-date tips on, what's the easiest way to do it and which method you use depending on what you're doing. And from there, I'll start digging in a little more to how do we work with the data itself, and what are some of the things that we can pull out of the Dynamics 365 data that we may not necessarily think of doing directly with Power BI. And I think one tip that I really pretty much always use is the ability to create links to Dynamics 365 records. And Scott actually wrote this, I think, about on CRM Tip of the Day here well over a year ago, where we basically take the unique ID and generate a URL that links directly to the record in question. So that'd be your opportunity or your account, etc. And you just have a little button inside Power BI and opens up the record in question inside Dynamics 365, and you can start working on the record itself. What I've looked at there is actually taking that one step further and then use the URL properties to actually being able to generate new records for a given account. So you can actually generate like a new opportunity for a specific account with a specific contact on it, for example, generate any kind of new records and pass information that you were looking at in context from the Power BI report, so the contact or the account or the opportunity, and make that part of lookup fields or populate specific information on the new records. You can actually bypass that step and say, if you want to create a new record for something that you're looking at in Power BI, you just click the link and you type in the information that you want in there, hit save and close, and you're back to reviewing your report. You don't have to necessarily open up that other record first.
Oh, good. Yeah, we had at least one episode about that. Is there any new developments in that, or is Scott, wrote, I think, 2-3 tips of the day, and they were all very good. So he didn't have to write any more because he had a very good tip.
So, that's true. Yeah. So he wrote the one on actually creating the link to the record itself. So what I believe I haven't seen anywhere else is creating that link from Power BI to actually generating a new record with information from either the account or the opportunity or contact, whatever that you're looking at.
Okay.
So I think it was discussed, but it was kind of at an idea phase. There wasn't actually any blueprint for it. So if you show up for the the conference there, I'll give you the blueprint on actually how to structure that link and getting the those records created.
Okay, good.
So, and another thing I like to highlight there is when we're using the data, one of the things that we lose when we embed reports from Power BI with Dynamics data back inside Dynamics is one of the great features of the standard dashboard is you log in and you see your information. Right, you log in and you have all your KPIs about your opportunities, about your services, your cases, etc. That's something that you lose in the Power BI reports because you basically bring in all the data, and by default you don't have that user context. And there I'm actually talking about using some of the same methodologies that we used when we talked about row level security, that we actually have a DAX formula called user principal name that can actually pass information about the domain name, or basically the email address of the user who's logged in to the data, and use that for creating KPIs. So you can actually do a list of, a count of all your opportunities, all the estimated revenue for your specific opportunities, and create some personal KPIs. So when you log in, you can actually have your personalized dashboard. It doesn't have to be for the entire organization. You don't necessarily have to drill down first into your specific user account. You can present all of that immediately using some of those functions. And that area you can actually take one step further, because in Power BI, in DAX, there's a function called path that basically lets you build a hierarchy of the different records. So you have your users and your users managers, for example, and a manager's manager. You can use that path function to basically create a text string with everybody's email address within that hierarchy. So when you apply that to your records and your formulas, you can not only create KPIs for every opportunity that you're the owner of, for example, you can also create KPIs for all the opportunities, all the estimated revenue, for the opportunities that are in your hierarchy, and for all the other salespeople that you're managing, etc., without necessarily filtering all the surrounding data, where you can still create those KPIs in there.
Okay.
So a lot of that context that I believe, including myself, was originally talking about, we're going to miss this context when we started working with Power BI reports, and it's one of the limitations of using Power BI versus using the built-in dashboards. You can, as we dig deeper and deeper, can actually replicate a lot of that functionality with Power BI, and then of course add a lot of the Power BI features and all the drill down effects and everything on the reports that you don't necessarily have access to within Dynamics itself. Okay. And then of course there's a whole option of using that context and the user principal name to also apply row level security, which can be a strict requirement in some organizations, depending on the type of data that's being stored.
That's things you're going to be showing if they come see you at the CRM Saturdays?
Right. So, we'll see how much we get to. I'm still putting the presentation together, and with 50 minutes, I want to show enough detail in each that people actually go home and replicate it. So we'll see how much I can fit in, but that's what I'm at least hoping to fit into the presentation. And of course, in that context, I also want to show how you could embed those Power BI reports and tiles as web resources and make them in context of your individual records. So we're not just talking about from Power BI linking to the individual Dynamics 365 record. We can also be viewing an account, contact, and seeing a Power BI report in context on that form specific to that individual customer, for example. Okay,
cool. One thing I was going to ask you, somebody was asking me about it, and I've seen it online, but I've never seen it. I understand there's the ability in Power BI Premium to run SSRS reports inside of Power BI. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. So it's one of the new features. I have not had a chance to play with it yet.
Supposedly, you're supposed to be able to do that without having to run an SSRS server.
Right. I am actually not sure then.
Okay.
On the specific details on it. I know they've very recently released a lot of information about using SSRS and Power BI Premium together. But I'm not sure how those details exactly, how those line up.
Because I'll tell you why I'm asking about it. Because we have a lot of customers move to the cloud, and invariably they have one or two reports that are more complex than you can do with Fetch XML. And so looking for options, of course, you can use the data export service and point an SSRS server to it. But what I'm looking into here, it looks like with the new update, you can actually run that SSRS report inside of Power BI Premium without having to set up your own SSRS server.
Right. I don't know the exact answer to that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stump you there.
So I do know that a lot of information came out recently. So it's one of the very recent updates, a lot of the integration with SSRS and what you can do with Power BI Premium, specifically Power BI Premium together with SSRS.
Okay, cool.
But it's definitely one of those situations where I even think that that's why the data export service was created in the first place, was for the ability for people to create SQL-based reports on your Dynamics data, just to get around the limitations from Fetch XML.
Right, and we've had some experience recently with the data export service. And generally, it works very well. Like Microsoft doesn't publish any SLAs on it. They say 15 minutes, but we found generally it runs much faster than that. But Microsoft doesn't guarantee it. But one thing that I have found, if you are depending on it, you want to look at how much data you're loading in on a constant basis, because we have seen people doing large data migrations or having large integrations where that can sometimes slow it down, so it's more delayed than normal. So you just really want to look at how real time you need the data to be.
Right, I believe it's like 98%. I'm going off memory here, but I think it's like 98% of the transactions are updated within 2 minutes. 2 to 3 minutes on the data export service. So that's the majority in it. And when I look at it, like when we're talking like human or manually created data or updates, they seem to go pretty quick. Whereas you're right, if you make updates to the data export service, add new tables, I'm assuming too if you have a very large migration and create a lot of records at once, then you probably have a little bit of a bottleneck that needs to be fixed before all those updates trickle through.
Right. Okay, so everybody come see Ulrik at the CRM Saturdays. You said, which one is this coming Friday, on the 5th or Saturday?
So in Sydney, it's on the 4th and the 5th. So we have the boot camp on the 4th and the conference itself on the 5th. And then the following weekend in Melbourne.
Okay, so all our Australian listeners, I believe George Dubinsky's out of town that day, so if you want to avoid George, go to Sydney this Saturday.
And I was actually hoping to catch up with him there, but I guess that'll have to be some other time.
What else you got?
So following us, kind of looking at what we can do with Dynamics and Power BI together, there's a number of tables that we can actually access with Power BI that we don't normally have access to, at least not from a chart perspective or UI perspective. And there's
Are these things like Activity Party?
So activity parties you can still access with the charts and create KPIs on them, but they're not easily accessible in the advanced find interface, for example. But one thing that's really been bugging me is the duplicate detection rules.
Okay.
Because every time you have some duplicate detection rules and they're turned on, and it's really important that they're turned on all the time, right? So if you make any kind of updates to the metadata on accounts or contacts or whatever your rules are on, those rules will automatically turn off when you publish those changes. The rules will turn off when you do it.
It sneaks up on you too. You don't realize,
and you don't notice it.
You see all kinds of duplicates and say, "I thought I had duplicate detection published," and then it's not.
I know, and then somebody imports like a whole bunch of like credit card transactions that we were supposed to file, and then that doesn't catch the duplicate on the transaction ID, and it's just a big issue. Now, and for a long time I was like, wouldn't it just be great if I could create like a little chart and dashboard with the duplicate detection rules, and I could see if some of them would turn off. But unfortunately, duplicate detection rules is not supported by charts inside Dynamics. However, you can retrieve all that data with Power BI. So you can actually hook up Power BI to your duplicate detection rules and put them on your dashboard and see which ones or basically make sure that all the ones that are supposed to be active are in fact active and published. So you can keep an eye on them that way. You still have like the 1 hour delay on Power BI Pro on your regular updates, but at least it's not gonna like sneak up on you and they're gonna be turned off by accident for a couple of days.
So that brings something to mind, and I just spoke at our customer conference about contact data quality, and duplicate detection was a topic. And one of the challenges with duplicate detection rules is the interface for doing a duplicate check only gives you 12 of them, so you can't easily see the full list. Would it be possible using Power BI in some way to access the match code and get more of a full duplicate detection list?
So what is it you can see in the interface?
I believe when you do a duplicate detection check and get the list of duplicates, it only shows 12 records at a time.
Interesting. So I do know that you can see the duplicate records and pull the duplicates records. So I believe that will be the entire set, since it's pulling the whole table and you're not limited by the interface. So if you do run them, you have access to, in Power BI, the duplicate rules. Specifically, that's generally the one that I've been pulling and looking at just to make sure everything's active. But you can actually also see the duplicate rule conditions, which contains the criteria, and then you have all the duplicate records also being created. So I'm not sure how many of those you can see, but it would pull the entire table, so I'm sure you can see a lot more than just the 12 that the interface would otherwise show you.
That's interesting. What are some other kind of hidden fields or tables that you can see with it?
So one thing I'm starting to look into here is, and this is for user adoption basically, you can also pull all the user settings, all the personal settings. You can also pull all the user views that people have created, all the user charts, and all the user dashboards that everybody's created. So you can actually create a dashboard with information about who actually creates new views, who actually creates new charts, who actually creates new dashboards. We all train people on it, but we actually don't know if they go ahead and do it afterwards, right? And most of them probably don't.
Follow up on that and make sure they do.
Right, and you can also see all the personal settings. So, if you're an admin or a support person and somebody calls in, they're having issues, etc., you could actually have a dashboard with that user and immediately see all the personal settings, see all the personal views, and see if everything adds up, and help them out that way. And maybe they need to create a new view, maybe they need to change the user setting. You don't have to guide them through how they check their own settings, etc. You can visualize all of those. And that includes also information about the mailboxes and see if the mailbox is running as it should. Somebody's complaining about whether they're not receiving emails, they can't send emails, etc. And you basically have access to the mailbox record and see if any alerts or anything on it at that time.
Okay.
So from a user adoption perspective there, and since this is actually something that's generic, maybe that's something Microsoft or maybe somebody in the community could create and share, because all those views and user queries, etc., will be the same from organization to organization. So it's something that you could have and basically just plop into all your different Dynamics 365 organizations that you're working with, and just get a quick overview of how much have people actually customized Dynamics to fit their own needs versus how much they're using out of the views and charts and dashboards that was made available by their
So that brings up an interesting idea then, using Power BI to kind of make your own organization insights dashboard.
Right, exactly.
So
I'll do a combination of the two.
What about the data used by the organization insights dashboard, or is any of that stuff available?
So it's supposed to be available. And I was actually looking through it at the same time. I was just trying to check how much information we could get out of the audit table that we can pull with Power BI. And the audit table doesn't really give us very much data, not very usable. What we get and can see in Organization Insights is actually much better. And Organization Insights actually has, on the website, have a lot of OData strings where you can pull the specific information into Power BI that was created, that you can see that it used to develop all of those charts that you can see inside Organizational Insight. So all the reads, the deletes, updates, etc., on all the different record types, logins, etc., you can pull in and actually mesh that with all your other data too.
Let me give you another one. What about the metric data from gamification?
So,
because that's supposed to be stored in the database. The KPIs are stored in the database.
Right. The KPIs. So I haven't tried to log Power BI. At least I haven't been investigating it for gamification. But if it's in the database, it should be possible to pull out.
Because that would be another one of my dreams, is to be able to use gamification more for just regular goals and goal dashboards, because it's more intuitive to set up a KPI inside gamification than it is to set up a goal and a roll-up field and all that. And so they came a little bit closer together when they kind of made that part of Dynamics, but they still don't show that data inside of Dynamics.
It pains me a little bit to hear, because I love goals. I think it's a great feature, and I also think it's like one of the most underutilized features. But you're right, it can be.
It's the last thing that doesn't work in mobile/unified client
I know
interface.
It can be a little daunting to set up initially. Yes, I agree with that.
It was a good feature, but they made it cumbersome that they didn't allow a kind of a template goal that would recreate itself. So if you have a weekly sales goal, you had to manually set it up every time.
Yeah, you have to set up like 52 different goals, right, to cover the whole year. So
I like goals, but goals is dead to me.
So we'll see. There's also one of those features that hasn't been updated. Like, you can still see the old 2011 interface there. It's kind of a throwback whenever you go set up a goal. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen with those. One thing, just to sum up on the Organization Insights, I mentioned that you're supposed to be able to pull it into Power BI using the OData connection. For whatever reason, that one is currently broken. So the way to get around it is to, instead of use the same query string as the instruction gives you, but you don't use the OData connection, you just use it as a web query instead. And I'll actually let you pull the data and transform it into those tables. However, there's a lot more manual work in the data transformation required in order to get it going, so it's one of those things where you may want to consider waiting until that OData issue gets fixed, unless you really need the data right now inside Power BI.
Okay.
So just a heads up on that if you try to work through all of those quirks around the Organization Insights data.
That's good to know.
All right, and then there's not so much on the Power BI front, but I think actually this is very exciting to see what's going to happen here. So within Relationship Insights, there's a new feature called Sales Insights, formerly known as Relationship Analytics, that finally came out of preview, and everybody can test it out now inside Dynamics 365. And that one is using customer insights on the back end. So interesting to see where that goes. I also just wanted to say insights a lot in that sentence.
Okay.
So, yeah, because it's kind of been the running joke for a while now that everything has to end in the word insights. So it's kind of funny that Sales Insights was added to the Relationship Insights feature set. So, but Sales Insights is the new feature that basically takes a lot of your activity data, your opportunity and customer data, puts it inside the Customer Insights database in Azure. That happens in the back end, so you don't even necessarily see that. What happens with the Customer Insights database. So you basically just see the Sales Insights interface. And you can specify on the different type of KPIs and how much weight you want to give different type of activities. If you want to put a lot of weight on appointments and phone calls versus tasks and emails. And then it basically generates a number of KPIs on how much time the customer is potentially spending on you. So all the emails they've sent you, all the meetings that they participated in, all the phone calls, kind of gauge an amount of interest and kind of give you a trending relationship on how you're doing with your customer, and give you some interesting KPIs there to look at. So that's all part of the Sales Insights under the Relationship insights. We're probably gonna start focusing a lot more on customer insights and digging a little deeper now that it's getting closer to coming fully out of preview, because there's some very nice features in that solution. And I know we've been talking about it for a while, and we're kind of just waiting for it to be fully released. But at least Sales Insights is out now, so everybody can try it out and kind of get a feel for what kind of KPIs that it can put on, add to your Dynamics 365 environment.
Okay. That's good. And this isn't directly related to Power BI, but it's important to note that on May 1st, the general availability of model-driven Power Apps became available. And so where this is indirectly related to it is this means that people outside of Dynamics 365 will basically be using the platform CDS, the CDSA platform, which at its heart is XRM. And so, I've seen that Microsoft has some templates for CDSA coming out. I don't know if they're fully released yet or not, but that should expand the horizons for the use of Power BI with the CDSA platform.
All right. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that's going to work on a day-to-day basis, or just accessing CDS with Power BI and see how that's going to be different from the preview version that I've been playing around with.
Okay, so what did you find? So you've been working in the preview for CDSA. When this is published, it'll be it'll no longer be in preview. So what was different? What have you found different working with CDSA versus working with a Dynamics 365 online version? Well,
so the CDS I was working with here was some time ago, where you actually connected Power BI to, when you connected to CDS. It was kind of similar to connecting it to an Azure analysis server, where you actually connect it to a pre-built data model. So you basically have access to all your tables, all the data, everything should already be renamed, all the relationships already created, and you can start create your reports with all the KPIs and everything that's already been made available in the data model. So in that terms, it was very different from connecting it directly to Dynamics 365, where you're basically connected to the raw data, and it's your responsibility to clean up the data model, transform it, and set everything up. So basically a lot of consultant work in getting the data model ready for end users to start creating the reports.
And was that on the CDS 2.0 preview, or was that?
So that was the original CDS, because that's the only connector that's been in preview inside Power BI.
Right, because now I think you'll just be able to use the Dynamics 365 connector, because your platform is Dynamics 365. You can put plugins in it. It's got dashboards. It doesn't have the core sales solution. But what we learned is a lot of the core entities, including things like operations and opportunities and orders, are available without a Dynamics 365 license.
Okay. So
cases are not, and there's a couple of other entities. But what we found is you'll be able to set up a model-driven app that includes companies, contacts, opportunities, notes, activities, all this stuff. There's certain functionality like the Outlook app or offline that require you to have Dynamics 365, or if you want to use the sales or customer service hubs, you need to. And it's unified client only, so it's not full Dynamics, but it's at its heart, CDS 2.0, if you've been listening to us for last few weeks, we talked about it, is Dynamics 365, and model-driven Power Apps means people through the Power Apps interface are going to be creating model-driven apps, which are basically XRM environments.
Right. And I'm very much looking forward to see those, and especially the Power BI apps that they've been announced are coming too. So I'm just waiting for more information on that to be released, but then we can definitely start digging into those and start talking about those as well.
Yeah, and then by the time this runs later this week, all that information should be out.
Right. Sounds interesting. I'll definitely be on it as soon as it comes out.
Okay, great. Anything else, Ulrik? You got to go pack for your world tour.
I know. No, that was it. Yeah.
How many countries have you visited, Ulrik?
Good question. So I actually haven't counted countries recently, but I can tell you that I've been presenting on 5 continents.
Wow. Have you? Who's ahead? You or Gus?
Definitely Gus.
Okay. He's been to all 5 continents?
I think he's been to all 6. So okay. I guess we can't really count Antarctica, right? I don't think there's a whole lot of Dynamics 365 implementations going on there. Although if there is, I would be happy to
if there is, Gus is probably involved in it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. And actually, the only place I haven't been is South America.
Let's start planning for the CRM Saturday North Pole edition.
Right. That'll be nice.
Frosty needs some dynamics.
I mean, that's the whole Santa Claus operations. It's a lot of children that goes in using the nice and naughty list.
But it takes all year and lots of operations. So they probably have a bigger need for Dynamics 365 for operations than CRM. Probably.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of social engagement and figuring out who's been naughty and nice that needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, but
right?
You get into the billions, it exceeds the capabilities of Dynamics marketing lists.
Yeah, and that's gonna be an expensive social engagement license.
He's probably got nonprofit pricing. Well, we're way off track here, so I think we'll put a stop to it. So thanks, Ulrik.
All right, thanks, Phil.
All right, bye. This has been Power BI and More with Ulrik Carlson and Joel Lindstrom. You can follow Ulrik at his blog, crmchartguy.com, or follow him at Twitter at crmchartguy. This episode is a production of Dynamics Podcast, LLC.